Okay, we're starting this shir number 16 in Choshen Mishpat. I'm finishing סימן Kuf Nun Hey, which is what was supposed to be last week, and then the next shir is going to be on Kuf Nun Vav. So we have from Sa'if Lamed Gimel until the end of the Siman. In this one, we're going to be discussing some Tzemach Tzedeks, but we'll start with Sif Lamed Gimel. Sif Lamed Gimel is if somebody was Soymech, put the Hezek in a place where he was supposed to be Marchik, and he still did not do it, and he caused the Hezek. Bring a Machlekes Rishonim, the Mechaber says Yesh Mishe Poiter, and Yesh Mishe Mechayev. Yesh Mishe, one says one way, one says the other one. Who's the Poiter? The Poiter is the Ravid. And the Bis Yosef and the Bach say that it's also the Rif and the Rosh and the Rambam, because you could use the Rosh to understand one place in the Rosh. You could understand that you put him into the one who makes it Poiter, and the one who's Mechayev is the Bala Itur. The Tur writes that the Rosh holds like the Bala Itur that he's Mechayev, that if he was Marchik and he caused Hezek, he's still Chayev. The only time when the Rosh would hold that is Potter is in a scenario when the Hezek would not be able to have come without any help from something external. That means only if this Hezek would only come as a result of your action, even if it's indirect, then you're Chayev. But if the Hezek cannot come without an external force assisting you, that's you put the ladder and the bird that bug jumps up to eat the birds, or the wind blows, that it wouldn't come without any external. That's a emes agrama, and that is potter. The Knesset Agdela doesn't do it into two shittas, divides it into three shittas. He understands this into three shittas in Sagos Hatur Sifkat Mem Vav. You have the Raiva that you're potter in every single case. You have the Bala Itur that is Chayev in every single case in these kinds of cases, except for this Nemiyah that jumped into the Shaivach and killed the birds, because Leider the Bala Itur can't go against the Gemara, and the Gemara says it's potter. And the Rosh, who he holds that everything is Chayev except for the Nemiyah, which is, we already mentioned that the Balait, the Gemara says so, and Menapitz Kutno, which when you take the cotton and you hit it to create the strings out of it, that you need the wind that's going to blow and create problems. Then he is Mekel in that one also. He's Poiter, and that's where he brings the reason, because the air assists him. The air is something else. He can't help. That's how. The Itur, the way the Knesset understands the Itur is Poiter, is Mechayev in all of them except for the Nemiyah, because the Gemara says that. The Rosh is Mechayev all of them except for the Nemiyah, and Menapitz Kutno, because the logic of the Rosh is that if the Hezek could not have come without an external assisting force, then it becomes a grama. That's how he explains in Sifkat Mem Vav. And Sifkat Mem Ches, he says that although that's the way it makes the most sense, but the Tur, the son of the Rosh, he understands the Rosh and the Bala Itur to hold exactly the same thing. And then Sifkat Mem Tes, he says even though the Tur holds that the Rosh holds that way, the same as the Bala Itur, still the Knesset Agdela says it's two separate shittas. He mentions another fourth shitta, another nekuda, not a fourth shitta, but another point that is not mentioned in the Tur, which is the shitta of the Riyaz and Shilta Gibayrim, that chiyuv of payment, not chiyuv al-chaka, chiyuv of payment for a zekes is midin knas. It's not midin that you did something. Okay, we're not getting into the argument whether it's nizakim is midin isur or midin mammon, which we discussed in the past. He goes, the Riyaz looks at it as if it was miskaven lahazik or not miskaven lahazik. So knas could only be by miskaven. So we can get to the Tzemach Tzedek who extends the obligation of grama, of the chiyuv by grama to much further than the majority of Paiskim. And it's nafkamina l'dinam. First, let's get to the few. What? No, we are mechayev because it's mamain, but it's midin knas. Chachamim were goyim midin knas, therefore going to do by miskava. The Erech Lechem points out that if you're going to follow the shit of the itur, then the Erech Lechem is on the mechaber. He says that you're chayev even if you did the archake, because ultimately you were mazik. That means once the Bala Itur's position is that whether you did that, even if you did harchake, this goes into the whole machlekes achreinim. If you did harchake kedin, or when are you chayev, when not? Because we discussed in the beginning of the Siman regarding eish, if you're chayev when you did proper harchake. He says that according to Bala Itur, you're chayev even when you're marchik kedin, because at the end of the day you were mazik. The Levush adds a few words into it and slightly complicates the situation because he connects it to Grama and Garmi, and that creates the lashon of the Levush is that the one who is poiter is because he holds that as Grama, that all these are Grama. The one who is mechayev because he holds that all these kinds of azekis are Medina de Garmi.
What's the difference in Grama and Garmi?
What's the difference in Garmi and Grama? Garmi is direct, done by your hand. The simple translation is that you did it, not hezek b'yadayim, but like something which you directly caused. And Garma, Gira delay is a form of Garmi, yeah? And Grama is that it's indirect. There's one step removed. The Levush doesn't go into discussion what would happen, the person who holds the mechayev, that means the Bala Itur, what would he hold if it's a clear absolute grama, and what would the Raivad hold if it's a, what would the Raivad hold if it's a complete garmi, because all the cases mentioned in the Siman, you could argue about some of them whether they're gram or garmi, but the Levush doesn't go into it. He just puts all of them into one category of gram and all of them into one category of garmi. However, so it's a little bit hard to understand how all of them fit into it. And Sivas Mishpat takes a little bit more nuanced approach to it, which fits better into it. And Biurim Sivkot and Yudzayin, he holds the one who's poiter, the Yesh Misha poiter, is because he holds that it's not gira delay, but you're causing gira. It's greimas giri. But if it's gira delay mamish, like a goyren, that he considers it gira delay completely, then you're chayiv, according to everyone, even according to the one who's poiter. And the one who says that it's chayiv, the shit of the Yesh Misha that it's chayiv, he holds that it's in all of them except for a clear grama, which means that it needs an external force to assist it. So that's how he divides the mechayev and the poiter, which fits a little bit better into the lashon of the Tur, that the mechayev who he holds as the rosh is whenever there's a would be poiter only in a complete grama where the grama is defined by an external force needing to assist you to create the damage. And he says, then he continues and he says, he doesn't quote the Erech Lechem, but he disagrees with the Erech Lechem, that if you're marchik and then you cause the hezek, you're only chayev by eish. That's the only one where hirchik v'hizik is still chayev. But all the other, which is sif aleph, but all the other ones you are potter. And even though from the itur it's mashma, like the Erech Lechem understood, that you're chayev even by other nazikim, which is not eish, if you're marchik kedin. He says the mechaber obviously did not follow the itur. He didn't paskin like the itur. It seems like in the Sivas holds the halacha is like the poiter, like the Yesh Misha poiter. However, if you look in yeah, but the Erech Lechem doesn't give you the out that he says. That's how he understands afterwards. He says that even though from the Itri you could understand that way, it's still we don't pass like the Itur. Still in all halacha, what does the Alter Rebbe write in this moment at the end of Seif Aleph? Alter Rebbe writes that anybody who's goyrem hezek to his friend, even if he's potter medinei adam, he's still chayev medinei shamayim. And not like the Ktsas, that the Ktsas holds in Siman Lamed Beis of Cotton Beis, and also the Chacham Tzvi in Siman Kuf Lamed Ches, that when it's a real grama, you're potter even medinei shamayim. The Alter Rebbe does not hold like that. Alter Rebbe holds that even by a real grama, since it's ultimately goyrem hezek l'chaveira, even if you're potter medinei adam, you're still chayev bedinei shamayim. And if you're chayev bedinei shamayim, that comes into the picture when you have a din Torah and you have to make a pshara, or bichlal, if a person, you could tell somebody to pay when it comes to dinei shamayim. The Marsham Chelik Bey Siman Reish Samach Tes, when it comes to discussions whether you're chayav bedinei shamayim or not, he says that when it comes to a grama, if you're nehene from causing the hezek, then you're chayav to pay even by grama. Because it doesn't make sense that you should have a noah when you're causing your friend a hezek. But from Alter Rebbe, it's mashma that no, any kind of grama, you're still chayav l'shalim. And, from Alter Rebbe,
Why if you're chayav?
Because it doesn't make sense logically that if you're nene, by causing a hezek, you should get away with it for free. So you should pay for the hezek, because you ultimately had a noah from it. Chayav, but he doesn't say if it's chayav b'nei shamayim or b'dinei adam. The Maharsham, Chelik Bey Siman Reish Samach Tes. The Tzemach Tzedek takes completely opposite approach. Right in the beginning of Choshen Mishpat, it's not in your books, in Siman Aleph of the Tshuvas, Seif Ois Hey in the Tshuvas. He says, he goes in Ois Hey when he discusses Grama and Garmi, and he says, Punkt verkehrt in what we just thought of until now for the shit of the Maharsham. He says, he starts by first he says, that when would we think that Grama is chayav b'dinei adam? Only when you're kavanosei lehazik and you don't have your own anoah from it. But if your kavanah is to have anoah and not to be mazik, and you have anoah from it, then that's a Grama where you shouldn't be chayav. Even you should be potted, even the chatchila. Means even the chatchila you're allowed to go ahead and do something which is a grama, which is going to cause you hanoah, because your intention is not to be mazik. When would you want to be mechayev somebody by grama? Is only when your intention is to be mazik him. But he says it's not so, because, and he brings a proof from the Rashba, and then he brings from the Rameh, that bases himself on, from the Rameh, according to the Ravid, and he goes now into a separate discussion. If you cause a hezek by grama, not garmi, in a way that you could have prevented this hezek from happening. That means it's not a grama that you would have done and you could have gotten away, that there's no other, you had to do something for yourself and there was no other way around it except by causing grama hezek to your friend. But it's something which you chose the way which is going to be a grama. And you did something which you could have prevented. You could have prevented the hezek, but it's still only a grama. And even if it would have caused you a slight hefsed, for example, if the example, where's this discussed? It's discussed if you sell a house to a guy because he paid you more than a yid would have paid you. So you caused the hezek to the yid, but it's only a grama. And you could have prevented the hezek. And it would have caused you a little bit of a hefsed because you would have made a few dollars less. So the halacha is meshamtinan la, you put him in chayrim because it's lachatchila, it's aser to create a grama, a hezek al yedei grama. And now, so why is it lachatchila? Because the chatchila, you could have done it in a way, you wouldn't have caused the grama, the hezek. Even though your intention is not to be mazikim. Your intention is purely for your own profit. And you still chayiv, meshamtinanli. It doesn't say meshamtinanli until he takes care of it. It means you're not mechayiv in b'dinei adam, but you put him in chayrim. And then the Tzemach Tzedek continues and says, according to the Shach, that you chayev in Garmi, not in Grama, move to Garmi. According to the Shach, that every Garmi you're chayev only when you're miskaven, only when you have kavanah to cause a hezek. So he says, based on that, a Grama, which lechatchila would be aser, is also yechayev if you kavanasi lahazik. And at least lechatchila is something which at least lechatchila is aser. And by a grama, if it's a hezek that you could have prevented, or a hezek that was already done, but it's a grama, but you could still return the hezek that you did. The object is in your hand, something came to your hands via grama, you caused the hezek. If a bunch of people are involved and something ended up in your hands that belongs to somebody else, but you have somewhat of a right to it, it's still considered a chatchila, and you still put him in chayrim. According to the Shach, it's only if you're miskaven lahazik. The Tzemach Tzedek says, even if you're not miskaven lahazik, if you're miskaven lahanaoseh, if the Tzemach Tzedek says two things. First of all, if you could have prevented it, and three things. First of all, that it's that it's by miskaven lahazik for sure, and by einem miskaven lahazik, if your kavan is for hanoah, then it's still also lachatchila and meshamtinan lei. If you could be machzir, if you could return it, or if you could have done it otherwise in a way that would not have caused the grama, even if it would cause you somewhat of a hefsid. And Tzemach Tzedek says, and maybe even bedinei adam you could be mechayevim in these cases, because it became a lechatchila. Lechatchila, it's also for you to do it when you could have prevented it, and lechatchila, when you have it and you could be machzir, you have to give it back, even by a grama. So therefore, in these scenarios, by a grama, you're chayev even bedinei adam, not only bedinei shemayim for sure. So it means it's Alter Rebbe says bedinei adam, bedinei shemayim, you're always chayev by a grama. So Tzemach takes it further and says that in certain scenarios of grama, you're chayev even bedinei adam. Depends. He has to chayev to fix the damage. In Siman Mem Daled of the Tzemach Tzedek, he brings a k'tzos. A k'tzos writes in Siman Shin Lamed Gimel Sifkat and Beis. He brings a tshuva of the Maram Rothenburg. The dina de garmi is only by somebody who's mazik, mamish mazik, not just by causing a separate discussion, Shin Lamed Gimel, not by somebody who causes a prevention of future profits, menias revach. So garmi, the chiyuv is not for, the chiyuv is only by actual hezek, but not by menias revach. Menias revach, even by garmi, you're potter. And therefore, b'mokim sofik, you're not moitzi. And it's a Tzemach Tzedek paskins like the k'tzos, that menias harevach is not in these categories of garmi, and therefore for sure it's not in the categories of grama, which the Tzemach Tzedek would be machmir in the scenarios which you mentioned before. And even though the Nesivos disagrees with the k'tzos over there, Nesivos doesn't quote the k'tzos, but explains it seems like even when it's menias revach, it's still chayev. Tzemach Tzedek writes a very sharp lashon on the Nesivos. Also es atzmai ki'ilu leyoda es Yosef u'bal k'tzei sachoshen. He ignored him as if he didn't know he exists. And Tzemach Tzedek writes the same thing as Siman Ayin Tes, same idea. But this is only menias revach for the past. Comes at Tzemach Tzedek and Siman Pei Aleph and says, yes, for menias revach, even by garmi, you're not chayev according to the k'tzos, but the k'tzos is only talking about the past, not about the future, which means that if you did something by garmi, which already caused somebody menias revach, then you're potter. If you didn't cause an actual hezek. But if right now he's in Bezdin, and you're going to be garmi menias revach on the future, not on the past. In Siman Ayin Aleph, there's a Tzemach Tzedek over there has a bunch of he'aris on Siman Reish Tzedek Beis in Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat, and over there's a Shach in Sifkat and Tesvav. And what's the Shach talking about? The first discuss what the Shach says is over there that Amor writes in Siman Reish Tzedek Beis, because that's what we're discussing, Sif Zayin, If somebody puts money, was mafkid money by a chenveni, and he wants the money back, he tells him, Tein li pigdoini v'ani, give me my money back so I can make profit from it. And the guy refuses to give it back to him. So then he's chayev for all the profits that he could make from that moment onwards, from that money. Why? Because then you're goyim, you garmi for future revachim. In this specific scenario of tenli pigdoini v'ani arviach bohem. And the Shach over there brings the shit of the Marshal and Yam Sheshloime that it's potter because it's a groma, even for the future. That's how the Shach brings. And the Shach says that the shit of the Marshal is even if you teveya him in Bezdin and you tell him I want the money back, he's still potter going forward according to the groma. And the Tzemach Tzedek says no, it's not like that. Not only because since it's going for the future. So first of all, for sure, meshamtinanle, because that we know, going by a grome, when it's something which could be muchzer, you could be machzer, or something which can be prevented, you are, even by a grome, you're still chayiv. Meshamtinanle, and maybe you're chayiv b'dinei yodam. So you're meshamtinanle that he has to give the menias harevach, whatever is meniah, going weiter, like the Rama says. Why? Because a groma, even if it's a groma, he says, even mele, if you want to say it's garmi, is one thing for sure. But even if it's a groma is the chatchila also going weiter. And from now on, after you call to Bezdin, or even after you ask him for the money and he doesn't give it back to you, it's already considered lechatchila for the future. Lechatchila, even the groma is also. And even if you gave it to him, not all to Pikadon, but you gave it to the bank, to Shulchani, and he had the right to spend them. At the moment you ask for your money back, you're chayav to return it. It's chayav to get it returned. And therefore, if you hold it back when you're asked for the money and you didn't pay it back, it's even though it's according to the Shach, it's only a grome going weiter, even by a grome going weiter, it's also. Therefore, meshamtinan. So,
What if he doesn't have the money?
What?
What if he doesn't have the money? He's not misguided. He doesn't have the money.
If he doesn't have the money, so just like he owes this money, he'll owe the other money also. Yeah, so even the Tzemach Tzedek is not talking about Niske Shchenim, yeah, which we're talking about over here, but it seems like according to the Tzemach Tzedek, that even the one who's poiter, that we said that it's mainly because he holds all of these agroma, and then Sivas Paskins that is the halacha that's potter. This is only going retroactively. You're potter from what you did before, but going weiter, if what you're doing now is something which is going to cause a hazak, even though it's groma, you still chayev. Not only are you chayev, even though you're not miskaven. And even if it's only minias revach, you're also chayev for the future. What will be minias revach? If you're not actually causing the walls to shake. But minias revach is, if you have something which is a hezek, which is not the hezek is gdola, but a smaller hezek. But because of that, the person is not able to rent his apartment, which he used to be able to rent out. That's minias revach. On the future. He says ulai. No, meshamtinan lei until he pays the minias revach al asid. The meshamtinan lei in Siman Aleph is where he writes that maybe he's even chayiv b'dinei adam. Until he's misalik the hezek or he pays. For whichever one it is. And on the past, he's for sure chayiv medina shamayim. Now we'll move from that siflam. The Gimel siflam adal, which we spoke about it in the past because it discusses the goyden. It says someone who makes a goyden in his own place. That we already discussed in Sifchav Beis, where it says in Siflam Adal, so I'm not going to get into it now. Or he was Kiveya Beisakise, which I'm also not going to get into it because essentially it's clearly written, it's no longer practical today what the Beisakise is. Or he did in other Melacha, which has Avak, which has sand, or Afar. You have to be marchik enough that there shouldn't be afar or avak, the sand or the dust or the smell to his friend. And the chatchila, it says you have to be marchik even if it only comes to Ruach Mitzuya. If he's mazik, he's potter. Why? Because the wind helps him. As we said, if you're mazik, we said before, this was specific cases, the reyach and the afar and the avak and all these things, even though the chatchila you should not do it, if you're marchik, if you didn't do it properly and you were mazik, you're chayev because you're potter because an external force is assisting you to cause the damage. Not according to the itur, but the way the tur understands the itur, because the tur connects the itur and the rosh. The tur puts the itur and the rosh together. Knesagdelo separates the itur that is us. That's mechayev in such a case. But the way the tur understands the rosh and the itur, no, they're potter in such a case. Sif Lamed Hey, all the archokas which were mentioned, this is except for the 4 which are going to be mentioned in Sif Lamed Vav, which is smoke, Beisakise, sand, and shaking the earth. If you're not marchik, and then the other person saw it and was quiet, didn't do anything, he's moichel. And this is according to the Rambam that we know that chazak is la'alter. Right? The Yoda beniskoi, and saw it right away, there's a chazak la'alter. And therefore you can no longer be me'akev going weiter. What does that mean? You cannot be me'akev going weiter. You're going to soon see when we discuss it soon also. Only after the person already was kevea, the davar hamazik over there. That means if he was shasak u'mochal beforehand, but the davar hamazik was not yet put there, that's a question. If he's then it goes into the whole discussion whether you're allowed to do it or not, whether you're allowed to stop him or not. That's when we're going to get to it. But after it's already done and you saw it and you were shaisek, you can no longer block him. The Bar Heitev and Sifkotim and Vav brings from the Knesset Agdayla that it's mashma from the Mabit. That this is how it's mashma from the Mabit. It's similar to a case when he tells him in Hezekari, he tells him Psach Chaloin, and he already went and opened the Chaloin. Then that is considered. Then after that point that it was done al pi dibura, he's no longer able to stop him from doing it. Now over here the smeh. And now the same thing, not only by Rav Sasak, but also in Sieya, if he helps him out, if he assists him in doing it, or he tells him to do it, it also helps right away. Yeah, it says Sieya imoi miyad. That's the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. The Taz says it's not Sieya imoi miyad, it's Sieya imoi biyad. If he helps him with his own hands. And the Taz says, and the Chiddush of the Shulchan Aruch is that Siyeh imoi biyad is for sure. But even if he only told him bepeh, it's also enough. The Smeh says no, it's not biyad, it's miyad. And the reason why it says miyad is to tell you that if you're Messiah, you don't have to wait like for anything else. If it's Messiah, it's miyad. There's no need for chazaka. There's no need to wait to anything else. And the only by shosak, that's when you need the yoda beniskoi, according to the mechaber. The Ramah says over here, yashemrim, that you need 3 years in the chazaka, but yesh lahoiros, like the shitta that it's chazaka is miyad. This is the first place where the Ramah is machriya, that you don't need 3 years. The Taz over here says that the kavanah of the Ramah is to be machriya on everything going all the way back. And when we spoke in Siman Kuf Nun Gimel, I already mentioned it. Right now in Messiah we said that according to the Smeh, Messiah the chazak is miyad, and it seems like according to everybody. The Taz says that even by Messiah, it's only according to the mechaber that it's miyad, but according to the other shitta that the Ramah doesn't hold like over here, that you need 3 years. Even then, even after Messiah, you still need you still need 3 years. And it happens to be that the Smen Siman Kuf Nun Dalet seems to imply the same thing as Sifkat and Yutes. Like the Taz here. The Taz and Siman Kuf Nun Dalet seems, and Sif Zayin seems like it holds fakert. There's a chazaka miyad. I'm not going to be machriya between the Taz who contradicts himself and the Smeh who might contradict himself also. Now I'm going to go into, there's a K'tzos over here. The K'tzos asks a general question. Let's say you have a chazaka of Gimel Shonim. Why can't the person then go and change his mind? You could compare it to a case when somebody says, Krak susi vi potter, rip up my clothing and you're potter. That if you already caused the damage, you're potter. And if you still didn't do it, and the person was moiche, you can't do it. And if you did it, you're chayev. And even if you started ripping the clothing and the person was moiche and says stop, and you continued, you're also chayev. And he says, and he proves it from the Rosh, because the Rosh talks about putting up a wall, which is cheskas tashmishim, that when a person is moichel, he's moichel for the wall being placed over there. And therefore he was moichel for the wall, for the actual wall to be there. Therefore he can't change his mind. But by iksus, he's not moichel on a thing that's happening, he's moichel on the action that you're going to do. So therefore, by iksus, you could be chayzer after you're moichel. But by a wall, you can't, because the wall's already there. So therefore, the K'tzah says, it doesn't make any sense. Why over here, we're talking about nezakim, which are going to go weiter. So even if you're mesayeya, and even if you tell him, why can't you change your mind after the chazak is over? You could say, I was able to handle the hezek, but now there's a new hezek coming, in 10 years from now, I want to stop you from doing it. And the K'tzos continues and says, specifically in Niskei Shchenim, that each person does in his own reshus, in his own property. Why? Being it's not that you're doing it in somebody else's. When I'm meichel to let you do something in your property, when I'm meichel to build something in my property, is one thing. I could tell you, okay, I was already meichel, I can't do anything about it. But if you're doing something in your property, I'm doing something in my property, and I'm meichel to you to do a certain hezek in your property, even if I let you go for 3 years, so you yitzikol days. Afterwards, there's a new hezek that's going to come, because the hezek is mischadesh, I could be able to stop you. So the K'tzah says that it's not midin mechila. It's not this mechadesh, it's not about mechila. This whole thing over here, it's not midin mechila. It's a din in relationships between neighbors. The relationships between neighbors work in such a way that when you're not mazik mamish b'yadayim, so as long as you were maimed beheter, as long as you did it beheter, that means whether you did it before the nizak was there, according to some opinions, or echte mamid beheter, which is the other person let you do the hezek, then you can no longer be chayzer, and there's a chazakah. Also, as a gadol, which we already discussed, when as a gadol you can't, there's no chazakah. And afterwards, if the nizak is hurt from it, then the nizak l'harchik esatzmei. Because that is the rules between neighbors, that if I'm going to start to do the way the neighbors' relationships is, each person has to handle some, has to let go of some of his issues to be able to have a neighborly relationship. So once he let go of it, it's already, he already approved it. It's not because of mechila that mechila you could retract. And then he asks a few questions on it, and he stays in Tzarechim, so I'm not going to continue with it. So let's move to Sif Lamed. Sif Lamed says that on these four which I mentioned, Oshan, it's called Kutre, Besakise, Avok, and Nidnun Lakarka, that there's no chazak if Ro v'shasak. That's the din of no chazak. But he doesn't mention Mesayeya. And it seems like that the Mesayeya for these four, the chazak does help. The Smen Sifkot 9 test points out that in these, a chazak cheskas gimel shanim will not help. Huh? You're gonna get
If mechilin is a kinyan, then why wouldn't Mesayeya work?
It doesn't work. The chazaka works. Chazaka doesn't work, but a Mesayeya does. Messiah is different. This is the Mechaber doesn't mention Messiah. It seems like the Mechaber holds Messiah does work, but Rav Shasak does not work.
Messiah is more than is a mechila.
It's not a mechila. Is doing the action for him. It's like a kinyan. L'chayra. The Nesivis also in Biurim Sifkat Nyotes and Chidushin Sifkat Samach Beis holds that these also there's no Cheskas Gimel Shanim assist to it. There's no Chazak in it. The Mechaber continues that therefore, even if he was Shaisik for a bunch of years, he could change his mind afterwards and these Nizakim G'daylim and force him to be Marchik. And the Ramah says that this applies even if he was Samach Beheter before the Nizak, Davar HaNizak was there. And the Ramah says two things. First of all, Samach Beheter, it works. It still doesn't work. And the second thing is that if there's Zeichem in HaHefker, Kol HaKodim Zacha. So now, the Ramah says that even if you're a Samach Beheter, you have to be Marchik afterwards. Comes the סימן Sifkat 9 test and says this is a quote from the Tur. B'Shem the Rosh. And the Paskins, like Rabbeinu Tam, that you are allowed to lechatchila be Samach any Davar HaMazik before the Davar HaNizik appeared over there. And being that you can't be moiche, according to the Rosh, when you can't be moiche, you can't be machzik. Therefore, in such a case, the chazaka does not kick in, even if you're koidem. The Avnei Choshen asks a question on the Smer. Says, "Does the Smer doesn't make any sense to say that it's because since you're not able to be moiche, you're not able to be machzik." He says, "Doch, with this if we're talking about Beis HaKisei. Beis HaKisei, the reason why the person is not machzik is not because there's no mecha, or because he could have been moiche. You're not machzik because it has a gadol. So the person who's nizak doesn't have to be moiche. There's not a chazaka anyways. So it has nothing to do with whether you're Samach Beheter or not. The fact is that he doesn't have to be moiche. So the svara that the only reason why the Ramah was based in the Tur, was based in the Rosh, was based in the Rabbeinu Tam, according to the Smer, holds that it's smicha beheter doesn't help, has nothing to do with samach beheter, that because you weren't able to be moiche, you weren't able to be moiche because it was before, so therefore you weren't able to be. The other one's not able to be machzik. Because here it has nothing to do with being din mechan, din chazaka. Here only has to do with whether, being the tenezik godly, you don't have to be mechal b'chlal. So therefore, he says, no, we have to explain that the Smeh has to go according to what Nesivis writes. Nesivis writes in Sifkot and Chaf. A din that if the nizar gives reshus to put a Beis HaKisei or any of the other big hazekim, and lachas kam v'kama, if he gives reshus to put a smaller hazik, which is not from these four, it works. Why? Because it's not that he gives him reshus. This is how the Nesivos explains. When I give you reshus to put a bathroom or a Beis HaKisei, it's not that I'm giving you reshus to be mazik me. I'm telling you. The nizik, me as the nizik, I'm telling you that I will not put something davar nizik next to it. Means I'm committing to you. Me telling you, I'm giving you reshus, means I'm committing to you that I'm not going to do something I'm not going to then go and put a davar nizik. It's not because I'm giving you reshus to be mazik me, because I can't give you reshus to be mazik me because then I could be moicha afterwards. I'm not giving you reshus to be mazik me. I'm telling you that the reason I'm letting you do it is because it's not going to have any effect on me. I'm not planning on building anything over there. I'm not planning on doing anything over there. So therefore, I have no problem with it. So therefore, if it's stam, there he was Samach Beheter before the Nizak, Davar HaNizak came there, so then it doesn't help because I never gave you the reshus, I never gave you the commitment that I'm never going to put something Davar HaNizak over there. So then even those who are matir to be Samach Kodim before the Davar HaNizak came, which is Shit of Rabbeinu Tam, it's not enough for, and as a gadol, like a Beis HaKisei or Kutra or Avok, which generates itself every day. And therefore, it doesn't help. That's why the Ramah says it doesn't help. But the Nesivus continues, if the mazik comes later, so I'm going to see that later on in the end of the Siman, that he proves that he had a kinyan for the mechila, then it works. But a mechila without a kinyan doesn't work in such a scenario. The Rama also says if you're zoichem in a hefker, if both are zoichem in a hefker, then kol hakodim zoichem. The Ulama Mishpat says in Sefkot Nechav Beis, that based on what the Rama writes in Siman Kuf Nun Dalet Sif Yud Ches, if it's a suffix who was koidem, then a moitzi mechaveiroi, you're not moitzi from the person who is besafik. That means if one person is a suffix, maybe person A was koidem, if a suffix who was koidem, then you're not moitzi misafik in such a scenario. The Mechaber concludes this if they made the kinyan, konu miyodai, it helps even for Beis HaKisei and even for Kutra and even for all the other things. The Erech HaShulchan points out that according to what the Taz says in Sif Chav Daled much earlier, that the Erech HaShulchan, not Erech HaLechem, the Erech HaShulchan is Rav Tayeb from Tunisia. It was written 10 volumes on Choshen Mishpat and 9 volumes on Choshen Mishpat in the new print. It used to be like 6, became 9. He says, he explains, he goes into discussion about it, and this is the only thing he discusses in Siman Kuf Nun Hey, this topic. He says about this, that if you made a kinyan, then it helps. If you don't make a kinyan, it doesn't help. So Erech HaShulchan says, based on the Taz and Sif Chav Daled, that's something that the Chazaka doesn't help for. You can't tanin, you don't do taninan. You don't say that the moicher was kinda with a kinyan. He says, over there the Taz explains it's because the lekeach and the yoresh are the same, and just like, so why by a yoresh we don't taina something which is not shchiach. By yoresh we don't do taninon for something, it's a general rule of taninon, we don't do taninon for something which is not shchiach. And it's not shchiach that somebody is going to make a kinyan on something where chazaka doesn't help. That's how the Taz explains it. The Erech HaShulchan says, the psak of the Taz is right, that we don't do tanina when there's no chazaka, but the logic of the Taz is wrong. The reason is different. The reason why we don't do tanina is not because the kinyan is not shchiach. Faket, kinyan is shchiach. That's why it's mentioned all over the Shulchan Aruch, the koine when it comes to hazekes. Matana is not shchiach, but kinyan, give a matana to be able to do a hezek is not shchiach. But koine, people all the time, they need money or they don't need money, they negotiate. Some people are willing to sell things or sell rights that they would not be comfortable with otherwise if they need the money. The reason why we don't do ta'aninan is because ta'aninan only works when Lu Yitzur, the original person, would be here, he would be Naaman without any proof. But when the original person, that means ta'aninan means we're toyin to the likeach, something which the moicher could have done, could have been tining himself. So he says that only works when the moicher himself, if he would have showed up, he would have been trusted. But if it's something that the moicher himself would have to brought proof to it, in this case, for example, of Beis HaKisei, that the moicher has to bring proof that there was a kinyan, so we can't say ta'aninan. And therefore, in Seif Chav Daled, where the moicher would have been neman that he did it b'reshus, so we say ta'aninan. And over here, if the person would have been trusted, we also say ta'aninan. But if the Yoshim would come, we can't say ta'aninan. Why? Because if the original person would not be trusted without a raya, we don't say ta'aninan for Yosh, we say ta'aninan for lekeach.
Regular Moshe, but not Gimel Shonim. Regular Moshe Sodan.
Yeah.
Even if he only had it for one day, which then he needs a raya, he needs a shtar, I'm still telling him lekeach. If he sells it.
Yeah, because we say this probably was a shtar. He would not like he would have to prove it right away.
Over here, he probably was a kinyan, no?
No, because over here it's not, because it's a nezik, you can't do a chazaka to it. By a karka you could do chazaka. By this nezik you cannot do chazaka. Since you cannot do chazaka means you always need a raya. Chazaka won't help you. You need raya for 30 years. You don't need raya for 2 years, for 3 years. You need raya for 30 years because chazaka doesn't help. So therefore you cannot say ta'aninan for Yerushim and you cannot say ta'aninan for lekeach. And then he adds, therefore, but still, let's not push away the svara of the Taz that it's because shchiach or not shchiach, I'm still going to take a svara v'tas for matana. That if the person claims matana, for that we can't say ta'aninam because it's not a davar shchiach. Why? First, it's not a davar shchiach, and second of all, because even for a matana you also need to bring a raya. And Machar continues and move to Sif Lamed Zayin, that what's the hezek of smoke? It's only hezek tadir, that is constant, every day, all the time. If there's smoke the majority of the day, then Rama says it's also considered a hezek gadol. The Bar Heitev here brings 3 paragraphs from the Knesset Agdola. Summarize 3 paragraphs from the Knesset Agdola. It's Nagoy Satur, Ois Nun Hein, and Vav Nun Zayin. I'm going to bring to you all the points that are mentioned in this Knesset Agdola because each one of them is important. The first point that the Knesset Agdola brings in these Sa'ifim, Ois Nun Hein, and Vav Nun Zayin, Nagoy Satur, is from the Goinim. That if a person says he's going to remove the smoke via a chimney, I'm paraphrasing the Knesset Agdola, that it's that word it's not going to be mazik, then he's right. That means the other person can't claim a taina about the ashan, about the hezek of smoke.
What if he says that you remove it?
I'm going to put a chimney to get the smoke up. It's not going to hit your house. The Knesset Agdola says this doesn't only apply to ashan, it applies to any kind of hezek.
If the chimney goes to the next house,
No, it goes up. Make a bigger chimney. You ever saw the chimneys they have when they make a restaurant in a building over here? You have to put a chimney 6 floors up, so it goes above everything. Your house still smells like French fries, but not too bad. So he says if the same thing, the same thing applies to every nezek, even a nezek gadol. If you say that you're going to fix the hezek in such a way that the other guy is not going to get a hezek, it works. And he proves it also from the Marashdam, Chelek Beis Siman Reish Samach Reish Mem Zayin. Third point that the Knesset Agdola says, a nezek is very important, which causes a sakana, a action, which the hezek is a hezek of sakana. It's even a bigger hezek than kutra and beis hakisei. He brings it from the Marashdam Siman Reish Pei Daled and the Mari Ben Lev Chelek Gimel Siman Mem Vov. Next point of the Knesset Agdola, if it's a suffix, this is very important. That each one of these is negei l'maisa. If it's a suffix, if it's a big hezek or not, that means we're not sure if the amount of smoke falls into big or not, or this beis hakisei falls into the category or not, or the avok is considered a lot or not. And therefore, it's a shaila if there's a suffix, if there's a chazaka or not. The mazik is the muchzak, and you don't might see misafik, and he brings it from the Marshach Siman Tazayin. Those are the pointers from him. The Beis Yosef here, in Sifkat Nun Hey, we're going back to Sif Lamed Zayin. About the difference between Ashan, between Tadir, Kol Hayayim, some Ashan, more Ashan, less Ashan. The Beis Yosef in Sifkat Nun Hey brings from the Rameh, and he's Medayik, that if the smoke is Tadir means that most of the day there's smoke. Even if it's a little bit of smoke, it can still be ma'akev. And if it's a lot of smoke, and it's not tadir, you could also be ma'akev. And the Beis Yosef brings from the Trumas Hadeshen that if it's not tadir, that even if it's a lot of smoke once in a while, you cannot be ma'akev. And you could be ma'akev, Trumas Hadeshen. And the Beis Yosef says you have to pass like the Rameh because he's a Rav Mefursam against the Trumas Hadeshen. And Darkei Moshe was made on it and says Adarabah. Trumas Hadeshen is Basroi, so therefore you have to pass against the Basroi, against the Rav Mefursam. So that's a machlekes. You go according to Basroi, you go according to Rav Mefursam. Machlekes Darkei Moshe and Beis Yosef.
So he said Trumas and Basroi.
It's Basroi to the Rameh. In Dvar Mishpat, who is the son of the Knesset Agdola, there's 4 generations that wrote on Choshen Mishpat. The Knesset Agdola's grandfather, I don't remember the names of the books now, 4 generations, they wrote Chiburim Knesset Agdola, each one built on the next one. The Dvar Mishpat is the last one in this 4 generations. He added things. The Knesset Agdola on these Simanim wrote 2 Maduras, Madura Basra also. But afterwards, the Dvar Mishpat, which is his son, with Knesset Agdola, he added a few things that he thinks that his father missed. A lot of times he adds more Manamekaimis to his father. Sif Yud Zayin, he says, he brings from Chesed Lavram, Chesed Mishpat Siman Aleph, and in Shas Shabbos Yodav Shel Moshe, Chesed Mishpat Siman Yud Aleph, that they be passing like the Rameh against Terumas Hadeshen, that one, if it's either Tadir or Oshan Rav, you could be Ma'akev. The Mechaber adds, continues and says that even if it's L'chatchil, you could be Ma'akev, even by smoke which is not Tadir. And the Ramah says, no, by Einoi Tadir, that's the only condition. If it's not Tadir, Tadir is the only thing that makes a difference. If it's not Tadir, even the Chatchil you can't be Ma'akev, based on Terumas Hadeshen. Now, the Smeh over here in Sifkot and Pei Gimel says, so over here he says you can't be Ma'akev. Now, over here it says that going back to the Smeh, he says if you could be Ma'akev, the Lashon that the Mechaber is you could be Ma'akev, and you could be Moichel L'chatchila. The Smeh says no, you could be Ma'akev because, he changes it, he says Dimmihu, because you were able to be Moichel L'chatchila, that's why you could be Ma'akev even by Oshan, which is not Tadir. Because you're able to be Moiche, therefore you're able to be Ma'akev. And therefore, if you weren't Moiche, the Chazakah helps. Why? Because if there's no Mechoeh, no option for Mechoeh, there's no option for Chazakah. But over here, because you are able to be Moiche, even in Oshan, She'einoi Tadir. Therefore, when there's a Chazakah, you could be, if you're Machzik, you're fine. Sim Mishpat gives a Sifkot Nechafalef, asks the question, he says, how could that be? What do I have to do over here with Mechoeh and Chazakah? Einei Yochel Limchus. He says, Meikare, you are, this thing has nothing to do with this. It says, if Meikare you're allowed to be Soymech something, then you don't need Chazakah. And being that you're able to be Soymech means the other person cannot be Moiche. And you don't need any Chazakah. So the reason he's Machzik over here is not because of that. He says that it doesn't make sense to say that the reason why you are Machzik is because you are not able to be Moiche. He says, Meikara, you were able to be Soymech, and therefore you don't need the Chazakah. Mechatchil, you're able to be Soymech. That's the question he puts over there. Erech Shai says no. He says, what's the Smeh coming to teach us? The Smeh is coming to teach us over here that because you were able to be Moiche and you weren't Moiche, the Chiddush of the Mechaber is that if afterwards you become sick, you can no longer be Moiche. You can no longer complain. Even on other places when you become sick, you could change your mind. Over here, because it's something, which is a hezek, that you could have been Moiche, so your Mechila helps even if you become sick. Yeah, that's the Erech Shai explains the Smeh. That's the Chiddush of Smeh. Now the Ramos says that if it's a lot of smoke, even if it's a lot of smoke, but it's not Tadir, you follow Terumas Hadeshen, you can't be Ma'akev even L'chatchila. The Shach and Sifkot New Test says we do not paskin like the Mechaber. We do not paskin like the Rama. We paskin like the Mechaber. The Sivus HaMishpat Sifkot and Samach Zayin brings the Shach and paskins like the Shach. But the Shach says, still in all, the Mazik has to bring a Raya, not a Nizak. Why? Because pluk to the Rabvasa, because the Machlekes Mechaber Rama based on the Machlekes Terumas Hadeshen and Rameh. So therefore, even though you cannot be Ma'akev L'chatchila, the Mazik has to bring a Raya that it's not Tadir, or whatever Raya he needs to be able to ensure that he's fine. The Ulam HaMishpat is Sifkot Chav Gimel says that we do paskin like the Rama, and he actually says that this is based that he's it seems like he's maksha on the Shulchan Aruch. He says doesn't understand essentially doesn't understand the Mechaber because Oshan she'einei kavua, the big hezek, but it's einei tadir, is the same. Goyren is also has a gadol, and it's also if a goyren which is not kavua, you're l'chatchila muter. So Oshan she'einei tadir should also be l'chatchila muter. And therefore he says, no, we have to paskin like the Mechaber, like the Rama, not like the Mechaber, that it's muter l'chatchila.
Who asked that question?
The Ulam HaMishpat says, doesn't ask a question, it seems that the way he presents it, the Ulam HaMishpat, Sifkot Nechav Gimel says that's why we pass like the Ramav, because Oshan She'enu Tadir is Doimet HaGoyer and She'enu Kavua. And he continues Ulam HaMishpat that when the Shach says that the Mazik has to bring a Raya, it's obviously according to the Shach, because the Shach holds that you have to be Machzik. And without, and therefore, if you don't have a Raya for the Chazaka or whatever it is, then the Nizak wins the case right away. But he says the Shach himself contradicts himself because earlier the Shach discusses other cases of Plukta de Rabvasa, and over there it seems that if whoever did it, Masha Asa, if you did it, it's done, and you can't retract it. So why over here does the Shach says that the Mazik, that the Mazik has to bring a Raya, and if the Mazik doesn't bring a Raya, he becomes Potter. Yeah, that's the question he asks in it on the Shach, and but that's Bichal he paskins like the Ramon, not like the Shach says he paskins like the Mechaber. Now, if somebody smokes in a place which bothers his friend, so the Chayr, if it's Tadir and it bothers him, for sure is Me'akev. Yeah? If it's not Tadir, of course, based on his moods. So according to the Mechaber and of course levels of stress, it could be once in a month or twice in a day. So according to the Mechaber and the Shach and the Nesivis, because the Shach and the Nesivis pass on the Mechaber, you can be Ma'akev. If it's ain't a Tadir, you can still be Ma'akev. According to the Ramah, this place to say you can't be Ma'akev. But then you come into a place that it's maybe a sakana. If it's a sakana, the Knesset Agdela says you could be, it's a nezek gadol, right? And you could always be me'akev, even if it's not tadir. If the other person can't handle it and you know it, you dua. So that we already spoke in Siman, we discussed it before, but it's later in Sif Mem Aleph, that if you dua sheina me'arer yochel esavloi, then there's no chazaka against this me'arer. You know, I'm sure you all know that there's machlekes if machlekes of the last generations, if smoking is beged sakana brura or not sakana brura. You have Chafetz Chaim, it says that it's sakana brura. You have the Tzitz Eliezer sakana brura. The Igros Moshe, it says, and the Ravad Yosef says that it's not sakana brura, but still chatchila you shouldn't be smoking.
For the person who's smoking, not for other people around him.
Yeah, so we'll get to the other people around him in a second. Huh? What? He says, it's not sakana brura. That's all I'm telling you. Forget about, we're talking about the person who himself smokes. The din of sakana, I'm not talking about hezek over here. Now, if a person smokes in a closed place, so obviously he has to get to shus from every single person, but it doesn't bother them. If you take the sakana element out of it, if a sakana element, then still a sakana tiknas sagdela. In Yechav Das of Ravad Yosef, Chelik Beis Siman Yud Zayin, discusses about smoking in a shul. He says, according to Reb Chaim Palaji, and according to the Shari Tshuva, Siman Kufn Dal Sifkot Nchaf, and Shilas Yaivitz, it's also to smoke in a shul because of Kalas Rosh. Forget about before we get to the sakana. But when you get to the sakana, it's interesting. I think the Shevet Alevi Chelik Yud Siman Reish Tzadik Hey has about 10 seifim, small lines about smoking. In Seif Zayin, he says, after he says discussions about smoking, Shevet Alevi Chelik Yud Siman Reish Tzadik Hey, his lashon is cholilo le'ashein b'mekaymes tziburiim shegam hareach be'atzmoi hu mazik gomur. That's the shit of the Shevet Alevi. So therefore he says that it's hezek gomur for everybody else, therefore it's also second-hand smoke. So over here, it will be the same thing. It will be considered a isur to smoke indoors, and outdoors, l'chayr, if it blows into the neighbor's house, it will be dependent on the hezek. Now, the Mechaber says that Oshan Tadir is only Beruach Mitzuya, but Ruach She'eina Mitzuya, you can't be Me'akiv. And the Prisha in Sifkot Nun Hey says, even if it's Oshan Tadir, Rav, Tadir, everything, if the only way you can get to your house is by Ruach She'eina Mitzuya, you can't be Me'akiv. Only, the Mechaber says, only if the smoke damages people. People are... What's damaging people? The Aruch HaShulchan explains it causes the coughing, it causes eyes problem, etc., etc. that the smoke that comes out from his oven or from whatever it is. But if it's not mazik people, you can't be ma'akiv, even if the smoke comes in beruach mitzuya. And therefore the Mechaber says that if the smoke comes in and the smoke comes into the house and it doesn't cause damage to the person, the Mechaber says he cannot be ma'akiv. But the Darkei Moshe in Sifkot Yud Gimel says, Take, you're not being mazik the person, but you're mazik his house, and therefore you have to pay to get rid of the walls that became black, to clean the walls or whatever it is, to make sure they're back to. And you could say he can't be ma'akiv him because there's no hezek, Adam, but he could make him pay for the damage. That's the Darkei Moshe. But if you look in Xoshen Siman Shin Samach Gimel Sifkot and Daled, he says that smoke that blackens walls is not a hezek. Why? Hezek is when you cause damage to the structure of the wall. Black soot on a wall just means that you could clean it. Says you could do it, clean the whiten the bricks. So therefore, it's not a hezek that you could demand from somebody to pay for it. So even hezek of this, he disagrees with the Darkei Moshe. It seems like that disagrees with the Rama, that you cannot charge money for this hezek. But the Ktsas over there says that if you have hanoi by doing this, you should pay for it still. It seems like what I mentioned before about the Marasham, that even he goes even further than the Marasham, that if you're not even causing a hezek. Yeah, he says it's not a hezek, blackening walls. But if you had hanoi, and the person is asking you to pay for something which he perceives as a hezek, even though it's not really a hezek, a halachic hezek, you should pay for it.
You don't have to know why you're doing it.
Huh?
You don't have to know why you're doing it.
No, you don't have a noi from blackening the other person's walls. Maybe you do. Maybe that's part of your fund that you have. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's a no. I'm not actually sure if that would fall into the category of what the ano that the Ktsas is referring to. Now we're going to get to the end of the Siman, Sifim Gimel and Mem Daled. There's a few things to talk about. Sifim Gimel, the Mechaber writes that if you're machzik in a nezek, Sifim Gimel and Mem Daled, Mem Gimel is nezek which has chazaken, and Mem Daled is nezakim which don't have chazaken. Mem Gimel says if you're machzik in nezek which has a chazaken, and the nizek comes and says that it's not so. So if the mazik says, you told me to do it, obviously means before he did it, or you saw it and you were moichel, or you were makir b'niskacha, you saw it, you were makir b'niskacha, and then afterwards you were shoisek, you're quiet, and you were not moiche, then the nizak, and the nizak says, no, I only saw it now. I only realized the damage now. I was moiche earlier, but you ignored me. All these, being that it's a nezek which could have a chazaka, that means not a nezakim gdoilim, therefore al ha-nizak lahavirai. The nizak has to be the one who brings the raya. And the smell over here explains of Kotan Tzaddik Gimel, that being that medina there is chazaka in these things, therefore the mazik is the muchzak, because he's doing it in his own reshus. The mazik is the muchzak in his own reshus. And therefore, and he's doing something in his own reshus, and he could do and he has a chazaka and sai in the land where it's done, and sai in the action. And therefore, if the nizak wants to change the status, he's the moitzi mechaveira, and he has to be the one that brings a raya. If the nizak does not bring a raya, he's the shuas heses and he's potter. Now, the bar heitiv sifkot and memvav, which for whatever reason got stuck on Seif Lamed Vav, but it seems like it doesn't belong over there. I think in some of the new prints it tells you that it doesn't belong there, it belongs in Seif Mem Gimel, brings in the Knesset Agdela that Mechile only works if he says clearly, you were moichel to me by being quiet after seeing it and after knowing that you have a hezek. And when does that? But if before he did it, he tells him I don't care if you do it. Then it's not considered the mechila. If you went ahead and did it, unless if the person then changes his mind. Because if right now they're coming to Bezdin, and I say, he gave me the shus to open the window, and I didn't open the window yet, and the other guy says, I didn't give you the shus to open the window, it doesn't work. The Erech Shai over here, not in Sifon, but Erech Shai over here in Sifkot and Hey adds that this whole ne'emanus that he has to do a Shvuas Hesses, to say that Mochaltali is only if he has a migu of Mocharta, the migu of sale. The only Mechila only works, he proves it from other dinim of Mechila, that Mechila only works only if you have a migu of Mechira, of Mochartali, he sold it to me. But without a migu is not, Yeah, but if it's without that, without a migu, he's not ne'eman. And therefore, he says, if he brings Eidim, the mazik, if the nizok brings Eidim, that he only gave, that he did give reshus, but it was only reshus, and it was only for a specific amount of time, for whatever reason. He could tell him, I gave you reshus because I was going to be out of town. And therefore the mazik is no longer ne'eman. Another point, the Shara Mishpat and Sifkot and Beis, which I mentioned a bunch of times in the past, or maybe I didn't mention by his name, that any of these tainas has to be a tainas body. The mazik has to the one who's machzik, has to be toyim b'tainas body that you're moichel to me. But if he's not toyim body and the nizok is toyim body, so the nizok is ne'eman. He's toyin the troisa v'shosakta. He's not toyin moichel. He's toyin roisa. He's not toyin hikata b'niskecha. It's not clear. He's not toyin mechila clearly. Sifim Dal is talking about if a nezik which does not have a chazakas, then the mazik has to be the one to bring a raya, and the smeh explains why, because the nizak is the muchzak in his own rishus. And that's where the hezek is happening. And therefore, because he did not have to be moiche, and the smell shita, so the nizak did not have to be moiche. B'meile, he has to be moiche such a big nezik. Therefore, the mazik has to be the one bringing a proof, because it's a nezek gadol, and mitzvah mechaveiroi olavaraya. He says that all this is only according to the mechaber. The mechaber holds the chazakas right away. But those that say that the chazak is gimel shanim, according to them, the mazik cannot just bring a raya of mechila or reisa v'shasakta or reisa v'kata v'niskecha. He has to bring a raya of cheskas gimel shanim. The Beir HaGoyla points out over here that this is only if we're clear that the nizak was first, and therefore the mazik has to bring a raya. But if it's not clear who was first, if the nizak was there first or the mazik was there first, again, which means that the nizak who wants to take away the hezek has to be the one to prove it. The Rama over here concludes in a certain situation when a person's house collapses, and two neighbors live together. The house collapsed. And the other one says, you're causing that Ganovim should come in through your broken property into my property. So the second one says, fix the damage or sell to other people. So they should fix it. If you can't afford to put up gates, sell it, and other people are going to fix it. So the Rama brings two shittas. The first shittas is Rabbeinu Yerucham that says that the second one does have to fix the damage. Why is that? The Bach and Siman Kuf Nun Zayin Sifkot Nehe explains that it's because it's gira delay. This is considered gira delay, and even if it would not be gira delay, it's a nezek gadol. The nezek gadol, the Rosh says that you still chayav to fix it. If it's a big hezek that you could fix, even if it's not gira delay, you still have to fix it. But doesn't make sense to say that clearly, because the only time you say a nezek gadol you have to fix is by gira delay according to the Rosh, so it doesn't work by any gira delay. But we'll leave that on the side. And the second shit is what the Beis Yosef Siman Kuf Nun Zayin, that it's not gira delay, and therefore you potter. The second second person doesn't have to put up the gates. The Shach Sifkot Nechav Beis paskins like the Beis Yosef Siman Kuf Nun Zayin. It's not because it's not gira delay, but because it's not bari azeka. Who says Ganovim are going to come? You think the Ganovim are going to come. It's not bari azeka. It's not for sure it's going to happen. The Sivas HaMishpat asks on this, Sifkot Nechav Beis, he says, what does bari azeka have to do with anything over here? Oh, this whole siman is only about gira delay. Every single case in the Siman is Gira delay. Suddenly you introduce a new concept of Bari Azeka or not Bari Azeka. If it's not Bari Azeka, you're potter. It's nothing to do with Bari Azeka. Must be because of Gira delay. Elamai, Ganovim is not Gira delay. You're not in control of the Ganovim. If you're in control of the Ganovim, it's a much bigger problem. But you're not the one running the Ganovim. So therefore it's not Gira delay. You could run your own gate, but the Ganovim do their own action. And even if they're shluchim, you could say there's no shluchus of Maraveda, so it's still not going to work. Even if they are your employees. Employees, I already discussed in the past, employees, you could say if they get paid a salary to steal, maybe they are considered your shluchim. Huh?
What's the say it is Gira delay?
Huh?
What's the say it is Gira delay?
You left it open, the wall is broken so people could come in.
But how can you you're not in it. How's it Gira delay?
Because the Ganovim are coming.
Is there a virtual certainty that they're going to come? Like the rainwater?
Yes, there is a quite certainty that it's not. No, because you're leaving open a opening to let people come in. Just like when you leave open your friend's gate and the animal runs out. It seems like in the Sivas Paskins halacha like the Shach, like the Bes Yosef, but not from the reason of the Shach, but because it's Pashat, because it's not, because it's Ganavim, not Gira delay. The Gra also in Sivkot Lamedav says halacha is like Bes Yosef, and therefore even the Chatchila you're not chayav to fix the gate. Not only it's not Gira delay, but it's not even Grama. The Gra over here adds it's not even Grama. Forget about Gira delay. Ganavim is not Gira delay because they don't, and it's not even Grama. The Aruch HaShulchan disagrees a little bit. Sifkat al-Nasif Lamet Ches says that even the people who say it's potter, they only tell you that it's potter, that if a Ganavim come in, since it's not Gira delay, you potter from paying for whatever got damaged. But still, even according to the Bes Yosef, you still have to put up the gate. The Aruch HaShulchan understands that Machlekes is whether you're responsible for damages or not. That happened. That's when the whole discussion, Gira delay, not Gira delay, Ganavim are Gira delay or not Gira delay, or Bari Azeka or not. But he says, according to everybody, you definitely have to fix it. So that's not the argument over here. The argument is whether you're responsible or not. That's how he understands it. Even though the Gra understands fakert, it's not. It's a din whether you have to fix it or not. Even the Chatchili says you don't have to. The Knesset Gdeila over here, and with that we're going to conclude. Agoy Satur Ois Ayin Zayin brings a similar, a more practical example. He says, because we were talking about the churva, and the one house collapsed, and therefore the Ganavim could break in through there and come into this person's house. So he says, if there's a churva next to your house, you're a neighbor, and next to you is a churva, is a dilapidated property, and he says, and it became the garbage dumping ground of the neighbors. Whenever you see a dilapidated place, it attracts garbage, and it attracts also homeless people and drug dealers and everything else. But it attracts a certain element of garbage in society. So, and he said, and the person demands that you do have to fix it. You have to fix the gate so they shouldn't throw garbage. The din is with him. That means the halacha is that he has to fix it according to both Shittas. The Knesset Gdeila says in such a scenario, it's different than Pirtza of Ganavim, because over here by putting the garbage over there, it's different. It turns into a garbage dump. And if he has no money, he has to sell. And the Knesset Gdeila doesn't explain why, but he says this is not the same as the din of Ganavim. And he quotes it from the Chuvas Hagayim Siman Kuf. And he says that this is, the Knesset Gdeila adds, this is not the same as the din of Ganavim. Over here, everybody would hold that you have to put up the gate so people shouldn't come and dump all their garbage next to your house. And with that, we conclude today's shir, and we concluded Siman Kuf Nun Hey.